Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, in the section titled Treatise on Angels, notes that angels' perfection involves their ability to accomplish their divine mission efficiently and without flaw, and that their perfection is also reflected in their enduring happiness and their role in the divine order. Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. You're joining me for part 5 of a 6-part video read on Thomas Aquinas' Treatise on Angels. If you are interested in angelology, this body of work, written in 1265, may be of interest to you. In the earlier videos of this series, I provided a bit of background on Thomas Aquinas, his vision that he saw during one Mass on a December Eve, and also his sudden departure from not completing his book, but also not publishing the Summa Theologica during his lifetime. So if you are new to my channel, make sure to visit my playlist and grab those videos. Now going back to angels, the idea, according to Aquinas, that the perfection of angels involves their ability to accomplish their divine mission efficiently, and that it is also reflected in their enduring happiness and their role in the divine order, is worth pause for thought. For those that have been following along, you are by now a bit familiar with the disputatio approach used by Aquinas in exploring and extracting theological truths through the structured questioning, the logical reasoning, and arriving at a final reconciliation, a technique borrowed and improved from Aristotle, which at first was not so well received by the Catholic Church. So it is in this next set of inquiries that Aquinas demonstrates that angels are aware of what their mission is, and that they do it efficiently because they are wired, for use of a better word, to not change the directive of their mission once they have made their choice to love or reject God. To me, that is such a huge distinction from humans, who for the most part are known to be a bit fickle, undecided, insecure, and self-doubting. And I'm not talking about the choice to love or reject God. I'm simply talking about things that I've witnessed, such as the choice to love themselves. Perhaps that is one reason why many humans are unhappy, and they feel that they don't know what their purpose or what their mission is, because there is this disconnect with the divine source, with their creator. And how can you love or reject something or someone that you have not established a relationship with? I think that for those that have eyes to see and ears to hear, there is a message beyond the angels. And perhaps it is not about the angels, but about our own happiness and connecting with our purpose, with our mission, and even our divine order in a mundane earthly existence. And that's worth thinking about. I hope that you enjoy this content. Leave me a comment. Let me know you were here. And I now turn the page. The Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas, translated from the Latin by Fathers of the English Dominican Province, Treatise on Angels, 60 through 62. Of the love or dilection of the angels, 5 articles. The next subject for our consideration is that act of the will which is love or dilection, because every act of the appetitive faculty comes of love. Under this heading, there are 5 points of inquiry. 1. Whether there is natural love in the angels. 2. Whether there is in them love or choice. 3. Whether the angel loves himself with natural love or with love of choice. 4. Whether one angel loves another with natural love as he loved himself. 5. Whether the angels love God more than self with natural love. First question. Whether there is natural love or dilection in an angel. Objection 1. It would seem that there is no natural love or dilection in the angels, for natural love is contradistinguished from intellectual love as stated by Dionysius, but an angel's love is intellectual. Therefore, it is not natural. Objection 2. Further, those who love with natural love are more acted upon than active in themselves, for nothing has control over its own nature. Now the angels are not acted upon, but act of themselves, because they possess free will, as was shown above. Consequently, there is no natural love in them. Objection 3. Further, every love is either ordinate or inordinate. Now, ordinate love belongs to charity, while inordinate love belongs to wickedness. But neither of these belongs to nature, because charity is above nature, while wickedness is against nature. Therefore, there is no natural love in the angels. On the contrary, love results from knowledge, for nothing is loved except it be first known, as Augustine says. But there is natural knowledge in the angels, therefore there is also natural love. I answer that we must necessarily place natural love in the angels. In evidence of this, we must bear in mind that what comes first is always sustained in what comes after it. Now, nature comes before intellect, because the nature of every subject is its essence. Consequently, whatever belongs to nature must be preserved likewise in such subjects as have intellect. But it is common to every nature to have some inclination, and this is its natural appetite or love. This inclination is found to exist differently in different natures, but in each according to its mode. Consequently, in the intellectual nature there is to be found a natural inclination coming from the will. In the sensitive nature, according to the sensitive appetite. But in a nature devoid of knowledge, only according to the tendency of the nature to something. Therefore, since an angel is an intellectual nature, there must be a natural love in his will. Reply to objection 1. Intellectual love is contradistinguished from the natural love, which is merely natural, insofar as it belongs to a nature which has not likewise the perfection of either sense or intellect. Reply to objection 2. All things in the world are moved to act by something else except the first agent, who acts in such a manner that he is no way moved to act by another, and in whom nature and will are the same. So there is nothing unfitting in an angel being moved to act in so far as such natural inclination is implanted in him by the author of his nature. Yet he is not so moved to act that he does not act himself, because he has free will. Reply to objection 3. As natural knowledge is always true, so is natural love well regulated, because natural love is nothing else than the inclination implanted in nature by its author. To say that a natural inclination is not well regulated is to derogate from the author of nature. Yet the rectitude of natural love is different from the rectitude of charity and virtue, because the one rectitude perfects the other. Even so, the truth of natural knowledge is of one kind, and the truth of infused or acquired knowledge is of another. Next question: whether there is love of choice in the angels? Objection 1. It would seem that there is no love of choice in the angels, for love of choice appears to be rational love, since choice follows counsel, which lies in inquiry, as stated in Ethic 3:3. Now, rational love is contrasted with intellectual, which is proper to angels, as is said. Therefore, there is no love of choice in the angels. Objection 2. Further, the angels have only natural knowledge besides such as is infused, since they do not proceed from principles to acquire the knowledge of conclusions. Hence, they are disposed to everything they can know, as our intellect is disposed towards first principles, which it can know naturally. Now, love follows knowledge, as has been already stated. Consequently, besides their infused love, there is only natural love in the angels, therefore there is no love of choice in them. On the contrary, we neither merit nor demerit our natural acts, but their love the angels merit or demerit. Therefore there is love of choice in them. I answer that there exists in the angels a natural love of choice. Their natural love is the principle of their love of choice, because what belongs to that which precedes has always the nature of a principle. Wherefore, since nature is first in everything, what belongs to nature must be a principle in everything. This is clearly evident in man with respect to both his intellect and his will, for the intellect knows principles naturally, and from such knowledge in man comes the knowledge of conclusions, which are known by him not naturally, but by discovery or by teaching. In like manner, the end acts in the will in the same way as the principle does in the intellect, as is laid down in Phys. 2, text 89. Consequently, the will tends naturally to its last end, for every man naturally wills happiness, and all other desires are caused by this natural desire, since whatever man wills, he wills on account of the end. Therefore, the love of that good, which a man naturally wills as an end, is his natural love. But the love which comes of this, which is of something loved for the end's sake, is the love of choice. There is, however, a difference on the part of the intellect and on the part of the will, because, as was stated already, the mind's knowledge is brought about by the inward presence of the known within the knower. It comes of the imperfection of man's intellectual nature that his mind does not simultaneously possess all things capable of being understood, but only a few things from which he is moved in a measure to grasp other things. The act of the appetitive faculty, on the contrary, follows the inclination of man towards things, some of which are good in themselves and consequently are appetitable in themselves, others being good only in relation to something else and being appetitable on account of something else. Consequently, it does not argue imperfection in the person desiring, for him to seek one thing naturally as his end and something else from choice as ordained to such end. Therefore, since the intellectual nature of the angels is perfect, only natural and not deductive knowledge is to be found in them, but there is to be found in them both natural love and love of choice. In saying all this, we are passing over all the regards things which are above nature, since nature is not the sufficient principle thereof, but we shall speak of them later on. Reply to objection 1. Not all love of choice is rational love, according as rational is distinguished from intellectual love. For rational love is so called which follows deductive knowledge. But, as was said above, when treating of free will, every choice does not follow a discursive act of the reason, but only human choice. Consequently, the conclusion does not follow. The reply to the second objection follows from what has been said. Next question, whether the angel loves himself with both natural love and love of choice. Objection 1. It would seem that the angel does not love himself both with natural love and a love of choice. For as was said, natural love regards the end itself, while love of choice regards the means to the end. But the same thing, with regard to the same, cannot be both the end and a means to the end. Therefore, natural love and the love of choice cannot have the same object. Objection 2. Further, as Dionysius observes, love is a uniting and a binding power, but uniting and binding imply various things brought together. Therefore, the angel cannot love himself. Objection 3. Further, love is a kind of movement, but every movement tends towards something else. Therefore, it seems that an angel cannot love himself with either natural or elective love. On the contrary, the philosopher Aristotle says, Ethics 9:8, love for others comes of love for oneself. I answer that, since the object of love is good, and good is to be found both in substance and in accident, as is clear from Ethic 1:6, a thing may be loved in two ways. First of all, as a subsisting good, and secondly, as an accidental or inherent good. That is loved as a subsisting good, which is so loved that we wish well to it. But that which we wish unto another is loved as an accidental or inherent good. Thus knowledge is loved, not that any good may come to it, but that it may be possessed. This kind of love has been called by the name concupiscence, while the first is called friendship. Now it is manifest that in things devoid of knowledge, everything naturally seeks to procure what is good for itself, as fire seeks to mount upwards. Consequently, both angel and man naturally seek their own good and perfection. This is to love self. Hence, angel and man naturally love self, insofar as by natural appetite each desires what is good for self. On the other hand, each loves self with the love of choice, insofar as from choice he wishes for something which will benefit himself. Reply to objection 1. It is not under the same, but under quite different aspects, that an angel or a man loves self with natural and with elective love, as was observed above. Reply to objection 2. As to be one is better than to be united. So there is more oneness in love which is directed to self than in love which unites one to others. Dionysius used the terms uniting and binding in order to show the derivation of love from self to things outside self, as uniting is derived from unity. Reply to objection 3. As love is an action which remains within the agent, so also is it a movement which abides within the lover, but does not of necessity tend towards something else. Yet it can be reflected back upon the lover so that he loves himself, just as knowledge is reflected back upon the knower, in such a way that he knows himself. The next question, whether an angel loves another with natural love as he loves himself? Objection 1. It would seem that an angel does not love another with natural love as he loves himself, for love follows knowledge. But an angel does not know another as he knows himself, because he knows himself by his essence, while he knows another by his similitude, as was said above. Therefore it seems that one angel does not love another with natural love as he loves himself. Objection 2. Further, the cause is more powerful than the effect, and the principle than what is derived from it. But love for another comes of love for self, as the philosopher Aristotle says. Therefore, one angel does not love another as himself, but loves himself more. Objection 3. Further, natural love is of something as an end, and is unremovable. But no angel is the end of another, and again such love can be severed from him, as is the case with the demons, who have no love for the good angels. Therefore an angel does not love another with natural love as he loves himself. On the contrary, that seems to be a natural property which is found in all, even in such as devoid of reason. But every beast loves its like, as is said in XOXO 13:19. Therefore an angel naturally loves another as he loves himself. I answer that, as was observed, both an angel and man naturally love self. Now what is one with a thing is that thing itself. Consequently everything loves what is one with itself. So if this be one with it by natural union, it loves it with natural love. But if be one with it by non-natural union, then it loves it with non-natural love. Thus a man loves his fellow townsman with a social love, while he loves a blood relation with natural affection, insofar as he is one with him in the principle of natural generation. Now it is evident that what is generically or specifically one with another is the one according to nature, and so everything loves another which is one within its species, with a natural affection, insofar as it loves its own species. This is manifest even in things devoid of knowledge, for fire has a natural inclination to communicate its form to another thing, wherein consists this other thing's good, as it is naturally inclined to seek its own good, namely to be borne upwards. So then, it must be said that one angel loves another with natural affection, insofar as he is one with him in nature. But so far as an angel has something else in common with another angel, or differs from him in other respects, he does not love him with natural love. Reply to objection 1. The expression as himself can in one way qualify the knowledge and the love on the part of the one known and loved, and thus one angel knows another as himself, because he knows the other to be even as he knows himself to be. In another way, the expression can qualify the knowledge and the love on the part of the knower and lover. And thus one angel does not know another as himself, because he knows himself by his essence, and the other not by the other's essence. In like manner, he does not love another as he loves himself, because he loves himself by his own will, but he does not love another by the other's will. Reply to objection 2. The expression as does not denote quality, but likeness. For since natural affection rests upon natural unity, the angel naturally loves less what is less one with him. Consequently, he loves more what is numerically one with him than what is one only generically or specifically. But it is natural for him to have a like love for another as for himself, in this respect, that as he loves self in wishing well to self, so he loves another in wishing well to him. Reply to objection 3. Natural love is said to be of the end, not as of that end to which good is willed, but rather as of that good which one wills for oneself, and in consequence for another, as united to oneself. Nor can such a natural love be stripped from the wicked angels, without there still remaining a natural affection towards the good angels, insofar as they share the same nature with them, but they hate them insofar as they are unlike them, according to righteous and unrighteousness. Next question. Whether an angel by natural love loves God more than he loves himself? Objection 1. It would seem that the angel does not love God by natural love more than he loves himself. For, as was stated, natural love rests upon natural union. Now the divine nature is far above the angelic nature. Therefore, according to natural love, the angel loves God less than self, or even than another angel. Objection 2. Further, that on account of which a thing is such is yet more so. But everyone loves another with natural love for his own sake, because one thing loves another as good for itself. Therefore the angel does not love God more than self with natural love. Objection 3. Further, nature is self-centered in its operation, for we behold every agent acting naturally for its own preservation. But nature's operation would not be self-centered were it to tend towards anything else more than to nature itself. Therefore the angel does not love God more than himself from natural love. Objection 4. Further, it is proper to charity to love more than self, but to love from charity is not natural to the angels, for it is poured out upon their hearts by the Holy Spirit who is given to them, as Augustine says. Therefore, the angels do not love God more than themselves by natural love. Objection 5. Further, natural love lasts while nature endures, but the love of God more than self does not remain in the angel or man who sins. For Augustine says, "Two loves have made two cities, namely love of self unto the contempt of God has made the earthly city, while love of God unto the contempt of self has made the heavenly city. Therefore, it is not natural to love God more than self." On the contrary, all the moral precepts of the law come of the law of nature, but the precept of loving God more than self is a moral precept of the law. Therefore, it is of the law of nature. Consequently, from natural love, the angel loves God more than himself. I answer that there have been some who maintained that an angel loves God more than himself with natural love, both as to the love of concupiscence through his seeking the divine good for himself rather than his own good, and in a fashion as to the love of friendship insofar as he naturally desires a greater good to God than to himself. because he naturally wishes God to be God, while as for himself, he wills to have his own nature. But absolutely speaking, out of the natural love, he loves himself more than he does God, because he naturally loves himself before God and with greater intensity. The falsity of such an opinion stands in evidence if one but consider whither natural movement tends in the natural order of things, because the natural tendency of things devoid of reason shows the nature of the natural inclination residing in the will of an intellectual nature. Now, in natural things, everything which, as such, naturally belongs to another is principally and more strongly inclined to that other to which it belongs than toward itself. Such a natural tendency is evidenced from things which are moved according to nature, because according as a thing is moved naturally, it has an inborn aptitude to thus be moved, as stated in Phys. 2, text 78. For we observe that the part naturally exposes itself in order to safeguard the whole, as for instance, the hand is without deliberation exposed to the blow of the whole body's safety, and since reason copies nature, we find the same inclination among the social virtues, for it behooves the virtuous citizen to expose himself to the danger of death for the public weal of the state, and if man were a natural part of the city, then such inclination would be natural to him. Consequently, since God is the universal good, and under this good both man and angel and all creatures are comprised, because every creature, in regard to its entire being, naturally belongs to God, it follows that from natural love, angel and man alike love God before themselves and with a greater love. Otherwise, if either of them loved self more than God, it would follow that natural love would perverse, and that it would not be perfected but destroyed by charity. Reply to Objection 1. Such reasoning holds good of things adequately divided, whereof one is not the cause of the existence and goodness of the other. For in such natures each loves itself naturally more than it does the other, inasmuch as it is more one with itself than it is with the other. But where one is the whole cause of the existence and goodness of the other, that one is naturally more loved than self, because, as we said above, each part naturally loves the whole more than itself, and each individual naturally loves the good of the species more than its own individual good. Now, good is not only the good of one species, but is absolutely the universal good. Hence, everything in its own way naturally loves God more than itself. Reply to Objection 2. When it is said that God is loved by an angel insofar as he is good to the angel, if the expression insofar denotes an end, then it is false, for he does not naturally love God for his own good, but for God's sake. If it denotes the nature of love and the lover's part, then it is true, for it would not be in the nature of anyone to love God except from this, that everything is dependent on that good which is God. Reply to Objection 3. Nature's operation is self-centered, not merely as to certain particular details, but much more as to what is commons. For everything is inclined to preserve not merely its individuality, but likewise its species, and much more has everything a natural inclination towards what is the absolutely universal good. Reply to Objection 4. God, insofar as he is the universal good from whom every natural good depends, is loved by everything with natural love, so far as he is the good which of its very nature beatifies all with supernatural beatitude. He is love with the love of charity. Reply to Objection 5. Since God's substance and universal goodness are one and the same, all who behold God's essence are by the same movement of love moved towards the divine essence, as it is distinct from other things, and according as it is the universal good. and because he is naturally loved by all so far as he is the universal good, it is impossible that whosoever sees him in his essence should not love him. But such as do not behold his essence know him by some particular effects, which are sometimes opposed to their will. So in this way they are said to hate God, yet, nevertheless, so far as he is the universal good of all, everything naturally loves God more than itself. Of the production of the angels in the order of natural being, 4 articles. After dealing with the nature of the angels, their knowledge and will, it now remains for us to treat of their creation, or, speaking in general, of their origin. Such consideration is threefold. In the first place, we must see how they were brought into natural existence. Secondly, how they were made perfect in grace or glory. And thirdly, how some of them became wicked. Under the first heading, there are 4 points of inquiry. 1. Whether the angel has a cause of his existence. 2. Whether he has existed from eternity. 3. Whether he was created before corporeal creatures. 4. Whether the angels were created in the empyrean heaven. First question. Whether the angels have a cause of their existence. Objection 1. It would seem that the angels have no cause of their existence, for the first chapter of Genesis treats of things created by God, but there is no mention of angels. Therefore, the angels were not created by God. Objection 2. Further, the philosopher Aristotle says, Metaphysics 8, text 16, that if any substance be a form without matter, straightway it has being and unity of itself, and has no cause of its being and unity. But the angels are immaterial forms, as we have shown above, therefore they have no cause of their being. Objection 3. Further, whatever is produced by any agent from the very fact of its being produced receives form from it, but since the angels are forms, they do not derive their form from any agent. Therefore, the angels have no active cause. On the contrary, it is said, Psalm 148, verse 2, Praise ye him, all his angels. And further, on verse 5, For he spoke, and they were made. I answer that. It must be affirmed that angels and everything existing except God were made by God. God alone is his own existence, while in everything else the essence differs from the existence, as was known above. From this, it is clear that God alone exists of his own essence, while all other things have their existence by participation. Now, whatever exists by participation is caused by what exists essentially. As everything ignited is caused by fire, consequently the angels of necessity were made by God. Reply to objection 1. Augustine says that the angels were not passed over in that account of the first creation of things, but are designated by the name heavens or of light, and they were either passed over or else designated by the names of corporeal things, because Moses was addressing an uncultured people as yet incapable of understanding an incorporeal nature, and if it had been divulged that there were creatures existing beyond corporeal nature, it would have proved to them an occasion of idolatry, to which they were inclined, and from which Moses especially meant to safeguard them. Reply to objection 2. Substances that are subsisting forms have no formal cause of their existence and unity, nor such active cause as produces its effects by changing the matter from a state of potentiality to actuality, but they have a cause productive of their entire substance. From this, the solution of the third difficulty is manifest. Next question. Whether the angel was produced by God from eternity? Objection 1. It would seem that the angel was produced by God from eternity, for God is the cause of the angel by his being, for he does not act through something besides his essence, but his being is eternal. Therefore, he produced the angels from eternity. Objection 2. Further, everything which exists at one period and not at another is subject to time, but the angel is above time, as is laid down in the book De Causis. Therefore, the angel is not at one time existing and at another non-existing, but exists always. Objection 3. Further, Augustine proves the soul's incorruptibility by the fact that the mind is capable of truth, but as truth is incorruptible, so is it eternal. Therefore, the intellectual nature of the soul and of the angel is not only incorruptible, but likewise eternal. On the contrary, it is said, Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22, in the person of begotten wisdom, the Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways, before he made anything from the beginning. But as was shown above, the angels were made by God, therefore at one time the angels were not. I answer that God alone, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, is from eternity. Catholic faith holds this without doubt, and everything to the contrary must be rejected as heretical. For God so produced creatures that he made them from nothing, that is, after they had not been. Reply to objection 1. God's being is his will, so the fact that God produced the angels and other creatures by his being does not exclude that he made them also by his will. But as was shown above, God's will does not act by necessity in producing creatures. Therefore he produced such as he willed and when he willed. Reply to objection 2. An angel is above that time, which is the measure of the movement of the heavens, because he is above every movement of a corporeal nature. Nevertheless, he is not above time, which is the measure of the succession of his existence after his non-existence, and which is also the measure of the succession which is in his operations. Hence Augustine says that God moves the spiritual creature according to time. Reply to objection 3. Angels and intelligent souls are incorruptible by the very fact of their having a nature whereby they are capable of truth. But they did not possess this nature from eternity. It was bestowed upon them when God himself willed it. Consequently, it does not follow that the angels existed from eternity. Next question. Whether the angels were created before the corporeal world. Objection 1. It would seem that the angels were created before the corporeal world. For Jeremy says, 6,000 years of our time have not elapsed. Yet, how shall we measure the time? How shall we count the ages in which the angels, thrones, dominations, and the other orders served God? Damascene also says, some say that the angels were begotten before all creation. As Gregory the theologian declares, he first of all devised the angelic and heavenly powers, and the devising was the making thereof. Objection 2. Further, the angelic nature stands midway between the divine and the corporeal natures. But the divine nature is from eternity, while corporeal nature is from time. Therefore, the angelic nature was produced ere time was made and after eternity. Objection 3. Further, the angelic nature is more remote from the corporeal nature than one corporeal nature is from another. But one corporeal nature was made before another. Hence, the 6 days of the production of things are set forth in the opening of Genesis. Much more, therefore, was the angelic nature made before every corporeal nature. On the contrary, it is said, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. Now this would not be true if anything had been created previously. Consequently, the angels were not created before corporeal nature. I answer that there is a twofold opinion on this point to be found in the writings of the Fathers. The more probable one holds that the angels were created at the same time as corporeal creatures, for the angels are part of the universe. They do not constitute a universe of themselves, but both they and corporeal natures unite in constituting one universe. This stands in evidence from the relationship of creature to creature, because the mutual relationship of creatures makes up the good of the universe. But no part is perfect if separate from the whole. Consequently, it is improbable that God, whose works are perfect, as it is said in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 4, should have created the angelic creature before other creatures. At the same time, the contrary is not to be deemed erroneous, especially on account of the opinion of Gregory Nazianzen, whose authority in Christian doctrine is of such weight that no one has ever raised objection to his teaching, as is also in the case with the doctrine of Athanasius, as Jerome says. Reply to objection 1. Jerome is speaking according to the teaching of the Greek fathers, all of whom hold the creation of the angels to have taken place previously to that of the corporeal world. Reply to objection 2. God is not a part of, but far above, the whole universe, possessing within himself the entire perfection of the universe in a more eminent way. But an angel is a part of the universe, hence the comparison does not hold. Reply to objection 3. All corporeal creatures are one in matter, while the angels do not agree with them in matter. Consequently, the creation of the matter of the corporeal creature involves in a manner the creation of all things, but the creation of the angels does not involve creation of the universe. If the contrary view be held, then in the text of Genesis 1, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, the words in the beginning must be interpreted in the Son, or in the beginning of time, but not in the beginning, before which there was nothing, unless we say before which there was nothing of the nature of corporeal creatures. Next question. Whether the angels were created in the empyrean heaven. Objection 1. It would seem that the angels were not created in the empyrean heaven, for the angels are incorporeal substances. Now, a substance which is incorporeal is not dependent upon a body for its existence, and as a consequence, neither is it for its creation. Therefore, the angels were not created in any corporeal place. Objection 2. Further, Augustine remarks that the angels were created in the upper atmosphere, therefore not in the empyrean heaven. Objection 3. Further, the empyrean heaven is said to be the highest heaven. If therefore the angels were created in the empyrean heaven, it would not beseem them to mount up to a still higher heaven. And this is contrary to what is said in Isaiah, speaking in the person of the sinning angel, I will ascend into heaven. The book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 13. On the contrary, Strabus, commenting on the text, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, says, by heaven he does not mean the invisible firmament, but the empyrean, that is, the fiery or intellectual firmament, which is not so styled from its heat, but from its splendor, and which was filled with angels directly it was made. I answer that, as was observed, the universe is made up of corporeal and spiritual creatures. Consequently, spiritual creatures were so created as to bear some relationship to the corporeal creature, and to rule over every corporeal creature. Hence, it was fitting for the angels to be created in the highest corporeal place, as presiding over all corporeal nature. Whether it be styled the empyrean heaven, or whatever else is be called, so Isidore says that the highest heaven is the heaven of the angels, explaining the passage of Deuteronomy chapter 10 verse 14, behold, heaven is the Lord's thy God, and the heaven of heaven. Reply to objection 1. The angels were created in a corporeal place, not as if depending upon a body, either as to their existence or as to their being made, because God could have created them before all corporeal creations, as many holy doctors hold. They were made in a corporeal place in order to show their relationship to corporeal nature, and that they are by their power in touch with bodies. Reply to objection 2. By the uppermost atmosphere, Augustine possibly means the highest part of heaven, to which the atmosphere was a kind of affinity owing to its subtlety and transparency. Or else he is not speaking of all the angels, but only of such as sinned, who in the opinion of some belonged to their inferior orders. But there is nothing to hinder us from saying that the higher angels, as having an exalted and universal power over all corporeal things, were created in the highest place of the corporeal creature, while the other angels, as having more restricted powers, were created among their inferior bodies. Reply to Objection 3. Isaiah is not speaking there of any corporeal heaven, but of the heaven of the blessed Trinity, unto which the sinning angel wished to ascend when he desired to be equal in some manner to God, as will appear later on. Of the perfection of the angels in the order of grace and of glory, 9 articles. In due sequence, we have to inquire how the angels were made in the order of grace and of glory, under which heading there are 9 points of inquiry. 1. Were the angels created in beatitude? 2. Did they need grace in order to turn to God? 3. Were they created in grace? 4. Did they merit their beatitude? 5. Did they at once enter into beatitude after merit? 6. Did they receive grace and glory according to their natural capacities? 7. After entering glory, did their natural love and knowledge remain? 8. Could they have sinned afterwards? 9. After entering into glory, could they advance farther? First question, whether the angels were created in beatitude. Objection 1. It would seem that the angels were created in beatitude, for it is stated that the angels who continue in the beatitude wherein they were created do not of their nature possess the excellence they have. Therefore the angels were created in beatitude. Objection 2. Further, the angelic nature is nobler than the corporeal creature, but the corporeal creature straightway from its creation was made perfect and complete, nor did its lack of form take precedence in time, but only in nature, as Augustine says. Therefore neither did God create the angelic nature imperfect and incomplete, but its formation and perfection are derived from its beatitude, whereby it enjoys God. Therefore, it was created in beatitude. Objection 3. Further, according to Augustine, the things which we read of as being made in the works of the 6 days were made together at one time, and so all the 6 days must have existed instantly from the beginning of creation. But according to his exposition, in those 6 days the morning was the angelic knowledge, according to which they knew the Word and things in the Word. Therefore, straightway from their creation they knew the Word and things in the Word. But the bliss of the angels comes of seeing the Word. Consequently, the angels were in beatitude straightway from the very beginning of their creation. On the contrary, to be established or confirmed in good is of the nature of beatitude, but the angels were not confirmed in good as soon as they were created. The fall of some of them shows this. Therefore the angels were not in beatitude from their creation. I answer that by the name of beatitude is understood the ultimate perfection of rational or of intellectual nature, and hence it is that it is naturally desired, since everything naturally desires its ultimate perfection. Now there is a twofold ultimate perfection of rational or of intellectual nature. The first is one which it can procure of its own natural power, and this is in a measure called beatitude or happiness. Hence Aristotle, in his book Ethics 10, says that man's ultimate happiness consists in his most perfect contemplation, whereby in this life he can behold the best intelligible object, and that is God. Above this happiness there is still another, which we look forward to in the future, whereby we shall see God as He is. This is beyond the nature of every created intellect, as was shown above. So then it remains to be said that as regards this first beatitude, which the angel could procure by his natural power, he was created already blessed, because the angel does not acquire such beatitude by any progressive action, as man does, but, as was observed above, is straightway in possession thereof, owing to his natural dignity. But the angels did not have from the beginning of their creation that ultimate beatitude which is beyond the power of nature, because such beatitude is no part of their nature, but its end, and consequently they ought not to have it immediately from the beginning. Reply to objection 1. Beatitude is there taken for the natural perfection which the angel had in the state of innocence. Reply to objection 2. The corporeal creature, instantly in the beginning of its creation, could not have the perfection to which it is brought by its operation. Consequently, according to Augustine, the growing of plants from the earth did not take place at once among the first works, in which only the germinating power of the plant was bestowed upon the earth. In the same way, the angelic creature, in the beginning of its existence, had the perfection of its nature, but it did not have the perfection to which it had to come by its operation. Reply to objection 3. The angel has a twofold knowledge of the word, the one which is natural and the other according to glory. He has a natural knowledge whereby he knows the word through a similitude thereof shining in his nature. And he has a knowledge of glory whereby he knows the word through his essence. By both kinds of knowledge the angel knows things in the word, imperfectly by his natural knowledge and perfectly by his knowledge of glory. Therefore the first knowledge of things in the word was present to the angel from the outset of his creation, while the second was not, but only when the angels became blessed by turning to the good, and this is properly termed their morning knowledge. Next question, whether an angel needs grace in order to turn to God. Objection 1. It would seem that the angel had no need of grace in order to turn to God, for we have no need of grace for what we can accomplish naturally, but the angel naturally turns to God, because he loves God naturally, as is clear from what was said. Therefore an angel did not need grace in order to turn to God. Objection 2. Further, seemingly we need help only for difficult tasks. Now it was not a difficult task for the angel to turn to God, because there was no obstacle in him to such turning. Therefore the angel had no need of grace in order to turn to God. Objection 3. Further, to turn oneself to God is to dispose oneself for grace. Hence it is said in Zechariah chapter 1 verse 3, "Turn ye to me, and I will turn to you." But we do not stand in need of grace in order to prepare ourselves for grace, for thus we should go on to infinity. Therefore the angel did not need grace to turn to God. On the contrary, it was by turning to God that the angel reached to beatitude. If then he had needed no grace in order to turn to God, it would follow that he did not require grace in order to possess everlasting life. But this is contrary to the saying of the apostle from Romans chapter 6 verse 23, "The grace of God is life everlasting." I answer that the angels stood in need of grace in order to turn to God as the object of beatitude, for as was observed above, the natural movement of the will is the principle of all things that we will. But the will's natural inclination is directed towards what is in keeping with its nature. Therefore, if there is anything which is above nature, the will cannot be inclined towards it, unless helped by some other supernatural principle. Thus it is clear that fire has a natural tendency to give forth heat and to generate fire, whereas to generate flesh is beyond the natural power of fire. Consequently, fire has no tendency thereto, except in so far as it is moved instrumentally by the nutritive soul. Now, it was shown above, when we were treating God's knowledge, that to see God in his essence, wherein the ultimate beatitude of the rational creature consists, is beyond the nature of every created intellect. Consequently, no rational creature can have the movement of the will directed towards such beatitude, except it be moved thereto by a supernatural agent. This is what we call the help of grace. Therefore, it must be said that an angel could not of his own will be turned to such beatitude, except by the help of grace. Reply to objection 1. The angel loves God naturally, so far as God is the author of his natural being, but here we are speaking of turning to God, so far as God bestows beatitude by the vision of his essence. Reply to objection 2. A thing is difficult which is beyond a power, and this happens in 2 ways. First of all, because it is beyond the natural capacity of the power. Thus, if it can be attained by some people, it is said to be difficult. But if it can in no way be attained, then it is impossible. Thus, it is impossible for a man to fly. In another way, a thing may be beyond the power, not according to the natural order of such power, but owing to some intervening hindrance, as to mount upwards is not contrary to the natural order of the motive power of the soul, because the soul, considered in itself, can be moved in any direction, but is hindered from so doing by the weight of the body. Consequently, it is difficult for a man to mount upwards. To be turned to his ultimate beatitude is difficult for man, both because it is beyond his nature and because he has a hindrance from the corruption of the body and infection of sin. But it is difficult for an angel only because it is supernatural. Reply to objection 3. Every movement of the will towards God can be termed a conversion to God, and so there is a threefold turning to God. The first is by the perfect love of God. This belongs to the creature enjoying the possession of God, and for such conversion, consummate grace is required. The next turning to God is that which merits beatitude, and for this there is required habitual grace, which is the principle of merit. The third conversion is that whereby a man disposes himself so that he may have grace. For this no habitual grace is required, but the operation of God, who draws the soul towards himself, according to Lamb, chapter 5, verse 21. Convert us, O Lord, to thee, and we shall be converted. Hence it is clear that there is no need to go on to infinity. Next question, whether the angels were created in grace. Objection 1. It would seem that the angels were not created in grace, for Augustine says that the angelic nature was first made without form and was called heaven, but afterwards it received its form and was then called light. But such formation comes from grace, therefore they were not created in grace. Objection 2. Further, grace turns the rational creature towards God. If therefore the angel had been created in grace, no angel would ever have turned away from God. Objection 3. Further, grace comes midway between nature and glory, but the angels were not beatified in their creation. Therefore it seems that they were not created in grace, but they were first created in nature only, and then received grace, and that last of all they were beatified. On the contrary, Augustine says, who wrought the good will of the angels, who save him who created them with his will, that is, with the pure love wherewith they cling to him, at the same time building up their nature and bestowing grace on them. I answer that, although there are conflicting opinions on this point, some holding that the angels were created only in a natural state, while others maintain that they were created in grace, yet it seems more probable, and more in keeping with the sayings of holy men, that they were created in sanctifying grace. For we see that all things which, in the process of time, being created by the work of divine providence, were produced by the operation of God, were created in the first fashioning of things according to seed-like forms, as Augustine says, such as trees, animals, and the rest. Now it is evident that sanctifying grace bears the same relation to beatitude as the seed-like form in nature does to the natural effect. Hence, from the first book of John, chapter 3, verse 9, grace is called the seed of God. As then, in Augustine's opinion, it is contended that the seed-like forms of all natural effects were implanted in the creature when corporeally created. So straightway from the beginning, the angels were created in grace. Reply to Objection 1. Such absence of form in the angels can be understood either by comparison with their formation in glory, and so the absence of formation preceded formation by priority of time, or else it can be understood of the formation according to grace, and so it did not proceed in the order of time, but in the order of nature, as Augustine holds with regard to the formation of corporeal things. Reply to Objection 2. Every form inclines the subject after the mode of the subject's nature. Now, it is the mode of an intellectual nature to be inclined freely towards the objects it desires. Consequently, the movement of grace does not impose necessity, but he who has grace can fail to make use of it, and can sin. Reply to Objection 3. Although in the order of nature, grace comes midway between nature and glory, nevertheless, in the order of time, in created nature, glory is not simultaneous with nature, because glory is the end of the operation of nature helped by grace. But grace stands not as the end of operation, because it is not of works, but as the principle of right operation. Therefore it was fitting for grace to be given straightway with nature. Next question, whether an angel merits his beatitude. Objection 1. It would seem that the angel did not merit his beatitude, for merit arises from the difficulty of the meritorious act. But the angel experienced no difficulty in acting rightly. Therefore, righteous action was not meritorious for him. Objection 2. Further, we do not merit by merely natural operations, but it was quite natural for the angel to turn to God. Therefore, he did not thereby merit beatitude. Objection 3. Further, if a beatitude angel merited his beatitude, he did so either before he had it or else afterwards. But it was not before, because, in the opinion of many, he had no grace before whereby to merit it. Nor did he merit it afterwards, because thus he would be meriting it now, which is clearly false, because in that case a lower angel could by meriting rise up to the rank of a higher, and the distinct degrees of grace would not be permanent, which is not admissible. Consequently, the angel did not merit his beatitude. On the contrary, it is stated in Apocalypse 21:17 that the measure of the angel in that heavenly Jerusalem is the measure of a man. Therefore, the same is the case with the angel. I answer that perfect beatitude is natural only to God, because existence and beatitude are one and the same thing in him. Beatitude, however, is not of the nature of the creature, but is its end. Now everything attains its last end by its operation. Such operation leading to the end is either productive of the end, when such end is not beyond the power of the agent working for the end, as the healing art is productive of health, or else it is deserving of the end, when such end is beyond the capacity of the agent striving to attain it, wherefore it is looked for from another's bestowing. Now it is evident from what has gone before, ultimate beatitude exceeds both the angelic and the human nature. It remains then that both man and angel merited their beatitude. And if the angel was created in grace, without which there is no merit, there would be no difficulty in saying that he merited beatitude, as also if one were to say that he had grace in any way before he had glory. But if he had no grace before entering upon beatitude, it would then have to be said that he had beatitude without merit, even as we have grace. This, however, is quite foreign to the idea of beatitude, which conveys the notion of an end, and is the reward of virtue, as even the philosopher Aristotle says, or else it will have to be said, as some others have maintained, that the angels merit beatitude by their present ministrations while in beatitude. This is quite contrary, again, to the notion of merit, since merit conveys the idea of a means to an end, while what is already in its end cannot, properly speaking, be moved towards such end, and so no one merits to produce what he already enjoys. Or else it will have to be said that one and the same act of turning to God, so far as it comes of free will, is meritorious, and so far as it attains the end, as the fruition of beatitude. Even this view will not stand, because free will is not the sufficient cause of merit, and consequently, an act cannot be meritorious as coming from free will, except insofar as it is informed by grace. But it cannot at the same time be informed by imperfect grace, which is the principle of meriting, and by perfect grace, which is the principle of enjoying. Hence, it does not appear to be possible for anyone to enjoy beatitude and at the same time to merit it. Consequently, it is better to say that the angel had grace ere he was admitted to beatitude, and that by such grace he merited beatitude. Reply to objection 1. The angel's difficulty of working righteously does not come from any contrariety of hindrance of natural powers, but from the fact that the good work is beyond his natural capacity. Reply to objection 2. An angel did not merit beatitude by natural movement towards God, but by the movement of charity, which comes of grace. The answer to the third objection is evident from what we have said. Next question, whether the angel obtained beatitude immediately after one act of merit? Objection 1. It would seem that the angel did not possess beatitude instantly after one act of merit, for it is more difficult for a man to do well than for an angel. But man is not rewarded at once after one act of merit, therefore neither was the angel. Objection 2. Further, an angel could act at once and in an instant from the very outset of his creation, for even natural bodies being to be moved in the very instant of their creations, and if the movement of a body could be instantaneous, like operations of mind and will, it would have movement in the first instant of its generation. Consequently, if the angel merited beatitude by one act of his will, he merited it in the first instant of his creation. And so, if their beatitude was not retarded, then the angels were in beatitude in the first instant. Objection 3. Further, there must be many intervals between things which are far apart, but the beatific state of the angels is very far remote from their natural conditions, while merit comes midway between. Therefore, the angel would have to pass through many stages of merit in order to reach beatitude. On the contrary, man's soul and an angel are ordained alike for beatitude. Consequently, equality with angels is promised to the saints. Now the soul separated from the body, if it has merit deserving beatitude, enters at once into beatitude, unless there be some obstacle. Therefore, so does an angel. Now an angel instantly, in his first act of charity, had the merit of beatitude. Therefore, since there was no obstacle within him, he passed at once into beatitude by only one meritorious act. I answer that the angel was beatified instantly after the first act of charity, whereby he merited beatitude. The reason whereof is because grace perfects nature according to the manner of the nature, as every perfection is received in the subject capable of perfection according to its mode. Now it is proper to the angelic nature to receive its natural perfection, not by passing from one stage to another, but to have it at once naturally, as was shown above. But as the angel is of his nature inclined to natural perfection, so is he by merit inclined to glory. Hence, instantly after merit, the angel secured beatitude. Now the merit of beatitude in an angel and man alike can be from merely one act, because man merits beatitude by every act informed by charity. Hence it remains that an angel was beatified straightway after one act of charity. Reply to objection 1. Man was not intended to secure his ultimate perfection at once, like the angel. Hence, a longer way was assigned to man than to the angel for securing beatitude. Reply to objection 2. The angel is above the time of corporeal things. Hence, the various instants regarding the angels are not to be taken except as reckoning the succession of their acts. Now, their act which merited beatitude could not be in them simultaneously with the act of beatitude, which is fruition, since the one belongs to imperfect grace and the other to consummate grace. Consequently, it remains for different instants to be conceived, in one of which the angel merited beatitude, and in another was beatified. Reply to objection 3. It is of the nature of an angel instantly to attain the perfection unto which he is ordained. Consequently, only one meritorious act is required, which act can so far be called an interval, as through it the angel is brought to beatitude. The next question: whether the angels receive grace and glory according to the degree of their natural gifts. Objection 1. It would seem that the angels did not receive grace and glory according to the degree of their natural gifts, for grace is bestowed of God's absolute will. Therefore, the degree of grace depends on God's will and not on the degree of their natural gifts. Objection 2. Further, a moral act seems to be more closely allied with grace than nature is, because a moral act is preparatory to grace. But grace does not come of works, as is said in Romans chapter 11, verse 6. Therefore, much less does the degree of grace depend upon the degree of their natural gifts. Objection 3. Further, man and angel are alike ordained for beatitude or grace, but man does not receive more grace according to the degree of his natural gifts. Therefore, neither does the angel. On the contrary, is the saying of the master of the sentences that those angels who were created with more subtle natures and of keener intelligence in wisdom were likewise endowed with greater gifts of grace. I answer that it is reasonable to suppose that gifts of grace and perfection of beatitude were bestowed on the angels according to the degree of their natural gifts. The reason for this can be drawn from two sources. First of all, on the part of God, who in the order of his wisdom established various degrees in the angelic nature. Now, as the angelic nature was made by God for attaining grace and beatitude, so likewise the grades of the angelic nature seem to be ordained for the various degrees of grace and glory. Just as when, for example, the builder chisels the stones for building a house, from the fact that he prepares some artistically and more fittingly than others, it is clear that he is setting them apart for the more ornate part of the house. So it seems that God destined those angels for greater gifts of grace and fuller beatitude, whom he made of a higher nature. Secondly, the same is evident on the part of the angel. The angel is not a compound of different natures, so that the inclination of the one thwarts or retards the tendency of the other, as happened in man, in whom the movement of his intellective part is either retarded or thwarted by the inclination of his sensitive part. But when there is nothing to retard or thwart it, nature is moved with its whole energy. So it is reasonable to suppose that the angels who had a higher nature were turned to God more mightily and efficaciously. The same thing happens in men, since greater grace and glory are bestowed according to the greater earnestness of their turning to God. Hence it appears that the angels who had their greater natural powers had the more grace and glory. Reply to objection 1. As grace comes of God's will alone, so likewise the nature of the angel, and as God's will ordained nature for grace, so did it ordain the various degrees of nature to the various degrees of grace. Reply to objection 2. The acts of the rational creature are from the creature itself, whereas nature is immediately from God. Accordingly, it seems rather that grace is bestowed according to the degree of nature than according to works. Reply to objection 3. Diversity of natural gifts is in one way in the angels, who are themselves different specifically, and in quite another way in men, who differ only numerically. For specific difference is on account of the end, while numerical difference is because of the matter. Furthermore, there is something in man which can thwart or impede the movement of his intellective nature, but not in the angels. Consequently, the argument is not the same for both. Next question. Whether natural knowledge and love remain in the beatified angels? Objection 1. It would seem that natural knowledge and love do not remain in the beatified angels, for it is said in the first book of Corinthians chapter 13 verse 10, "When that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away." But natural love and knowledge are imperfect in comparison with beatified knowledge and love. Therefore, in beatitude, natural knowledge and love cease. Objection 2. Further, where one suffices, another is superfluous, but the knowledge and love of glory suffice for the beatified angels. Therefore, it would be superfluous for their natural knowledge and love to remain. Objection 3. Further, the same faculty has not two simultaneous acts, as the same line cannot, at the same end, be terminated in 2 points. But the beatified angels are always exercising their beatified knowledge and love. For, as is said in Ethics 1:8, happiness consists not in habit, but in act. Therefore, there can never be natural knowledge and love in the angels. On the contrary, so long as a nature endures, its operation remains. But beatitude does not destroy nature, since it is its perfection. Therefore, it does not take away natural knowledge and love. I answer that natural knowledge and love remain in the angels, for as principles of operations are mutually related, so are the operations themselves. Now it is manifest that nature is to beatitude as first to second, because beatitude is superadded to nature, but the first must ever be preserved in the second. Consequently, nature must be preserved in beatitude, and in like manner the act of nature must be preserved in the act of beatitude. Reply to objection 1. The advent of a perfection removes the opposite imperfection. Now the imperfection of nature is not opposed to the perfection of beatitude, but underlies it, as the imperfection of the power underlies the perfection of the form, and the power is not taken away from the form, but the privation which is opposed to the form. In the same way, the imperfection of natural knowledge is not opposed to the perfection of the knowledge in glory, for nothing hinders us from knowing a thing through various mediums, as a thing may be known at the one time through a probable medium and through a demonstrative one. In like manner, an angel can know God by his essence, and this appertains to his knowledge of glory, and at the same time he can know God by his own essence, which belongs to his natural knowledge. Reply to objection 2. All things which make up beatitude are sufficient of themselves, but in order for them to exist, they presuppose the natural gifts, because no beatitude is self-subsisting except the uncreated beatitude. Reply to objection 3. There cannot be two operations of the one faculty at the one time, except the one be ordained to the other. But natural knowledge and love are ordained to the knowledge and love of glory. Accordingly, there is nothing to hinder natural knowledge and love from existing in the angel conjointly with those of glory. Next question. Whether a beatified angel can sin? Objection 1. It would seem that a beatified angel can sin, for as was said above, beatitude does not do away with nature, but it is of the very notion of created nature that it can fail. Therefore, a beatified angel can sin. Objection 2. Further, the rational powers are referred to opposites, as the philosopher Aristotle observes, but the will of the angel in beatitude does not cease to be rational. Therefore, it is inclined towards good and evil. Objection 3. Further, it belongs to the liberty of free will for man to be able to choose good or evil, but the freedom of will is not lessened in the beatified angels, therefore they can sin. On the contrary, Augustine says that there is in the holy angels that nature which cannot sin. Therefore, the holy angels cannot sin. I answer that the beatified angels cannot sin. The reason for this is because their beatitude consists in seeing God through his essence. Now, God's essence is the very essence of goodness. Consequently, the angel beholding God is disposed towards God in the same way as anyone else not seeing God is to the common form of goodness. Now, it is impossible for any man either to will or to do anything except aiming at what is good, or for him to wish to turn away from good precisely as such. Therefore, the beatified angel can neither will nor act except as aiming towards God. Now, whoever wills or acts in this manner cannot sin. Consequently, the beatified angel cannot sin. Reply to objection 1. Created good, considered in itself, can fail, but from its perfect union with the uncreated good, such as is the union of beatitude, it is rendered unable to sin, for the reason already alleged. Reply to objection 2. The rational powers are referred to opposites in the things to which they are not inclined naturally, but as to the things whereunto they have a natural tendency, they are not referred to opposites, for the intellect cannot but assent to naturally known principles. In the same way, the will cannot help clinging to good, formally as good, because the will is naturally ordained to good as to its proper object. Consequently, the will of the angels is referred to opposites as to doing many things or not doing them, but they have no tendency to opposites with regard to God himself, whom they see to be the very nature of goodness. But in all things their aim is towards God, whichever alternative they choose. That is not sinful. Reply to objection 3. Free will, in its choice of means to an end, is disposed just as the intellect is to conclusions. Now it is evident that it belongs to the power of the intellect to be able to proceed to different conclusions, according to given principles. But for it to proceed to some conclusion by passing out of the order of the principles comes of its own defect. Hence it belongs to the perfection of its liberty for the free will to be able to choose between opposite things, keeping the order of the end in view, but it comes of the defect of liberty for it to choose anything by turning away from the order of the end, and this is to sin. Hence there is greater liberty of will in the angels who cannot sin than there is in ourselves who can sin. Next question. Whether the beatified angels advance in beatitude? Objection 1. It would seem that the beatified angels can advance in beatitude, for charity is the principle of merit, but there is perfect charity in the angels, therefore the beatified angels can merit. Now, as merit increases, the reward of beatitude increases, therefore the beatified angels can progress in beatitude. Objection 2. Further, Augustine says that God makes use of us for our own gain and for his own goodness. The same thing happens to angels, whom he uses for spiritual ministrations. Since they are all ministering spirits sent to minister for them who shall receive the inheritance of salvation, as per the book of Hebrews chapter 1:14, this would not be for their profit were they not to merit thereby, nor to advance to beatitude. It remains then that the beatified angels can merit and can advance in beatitude. Objection 3. Further, it argues imperfection for anyone not occupying the foremost place not to be able to advance. But the angels are not in the highest degree of beatitude. Therefore, if unable to ascend higher, it would appear that there is imperfection and defect in them, which is not admissible. On the contrary, merit and progress belong to this present condition of life. But angels are not wayfarers traveling towards beatitude. They are already in possession of beatitude. Consequently, the beatified angels can neither merit nor advance in beatitude. I answer that In every movement, the mover's intention is centered upon one determined end, to which he intends to lead the movable object, because intention looks to the end, to which infinite progress is repugnant. Now, it is evident, since the rational creature cannot, of its own power, attain to its beatitude, which consists in the vision of God, as is clear from what has gone before, that is, to be moved by God towards its beatitude. Therefore, there must be some one determined thing to which every rational creature is directed as to its last end. Now, this one determinate object cannot, in the vision of God, consist precisely in that which is seen, for the supreme truth is seen by all the blessed in various degrees, but it is on the part of the mode of vision that diverse terms are fixed beforehand by the intention of him who directs towards the end. For it is impossible that as the rational creature is led on to the vision of the supreme essence, it should be led on in the same way to the supreme mode of vision, which is comprehension, for this belongs to God only, as is evident from what was said above. But since infinite efficacy is required for comprehending God, while the creature's efficacy is beholding is only finite, and since every finite being is in infinite degrees removed from the infinite, it comes to pass that the rational creature understands God more or less clearly according to infinite degrees, and as beatitude consists in vision, so the degree of vision lies in a determinate mode of the vision. Therefore, every rational creature is led by God to the end of its beatitude, that from God's predestination it is brought even to a determined degree of beatitude. Consequently, when that degree is once secured, it cannot pass to a higher degree. Reply to objection 1. Merit belongs to a subject which is moving towards its end. Now the rational creature is moved towards its end, not merely passively, but also by working actively. If the end is within the power of the rational creature, then its action is said to procure the end, as means acquires knowledge by reflection. But if the end be beyond its power, and is looked for from another, then the action will be meritorious of such end. But what is already in the ultimate term is not said to be moved, but to have been moved. Consequently, to merit belongs to the imperfect charity of this life, whereas perfect charity does not merit, but rather enjoys the reward. Even as in acquired habits, the operation preceding the habit is productive of the habit, but the operation from an acquired habit is both perfect and enjoyable. In the same way, the act of perfect charity has no quality of merit, but belongs rather to the perfection of the reward. Reply to objection 2. A thing can be termed useful in two ways. First of all, as being on the way to an end, and so the merit of beatitude is useful. Secondly, as the part is useful for the whole, as the whole for a house. In this way, the angelic ministerings are useful for the beatified angels, inasmuch as they are a part of their beatitude. For to pour out acquired perfection upon others is of the nature of what is perfect, considered as perfect. Reply to objection 3. Although a beatified angel is not absolutely in the highest degree of beatitude, yet in his own regard he is in the highest degree, according to divine predestination. Nevertheless, the joy of the angels can be increased with regard to the salvation of such as are saved by their ministrations, according to the book of Luke chapter 15 verse 10. There is joy before the angels of God upon one sinner doing penance. Such joy belongs to their accidental reward, which can be increased unto judgment day. Hence, some writers say that they can merit as to their accidental reward, but it is better to say that the blessed can in no wise merit without being at the same time a wayfarer and a comprehensor, like Christ, who alone was such. For the blessed acquire such joy from the virtue of their beatitude rather than merit it. Meet me at the next video where we continue with Thomas Aquinas, the Summa Theologica Treatise on Angels. Please hit the like button, share this with like-minded people, family and friends, and subscribe to the channel.